The envelope was white. That was what Aveline noticed first. Not the words inside, not the expression on Paxton's face, but the clean, pressed whiteness of it, held out toward her in the corridor of St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, where her mother had been breathing through a machine for the past 6 days. Aveline Bouchard Kemp, 37-year-old wife of Paxton Kemp, and the woman the business world knew only as a quiet philanthropist with a fondness for preserving heritage buildings, stood in the hallway outside room 412 in a grey cardigan that still smelled faintly of her mother's house. Her hands were shaking, not from what she was about to receive, from what she had just left, her mother's hand going slack in hers, the monitor above the bed humming low, a nurse saying something in a voice that sounded very far away. Paxton Kemp, 44-year-old vice president of development at Meridian Peak Properties, stood 3 feet from her. His suit was pressed. He had shaved. He had not visited the hospital once in 6 days. "This isn't something I wanted to do here," he said, as though the location were the problem. "But I think it's better to be honest. I need to move forward." Aveline looked at the envelope, then at her husband, then at the woman standing at the end of the corridor near the elevator. Lizette Dre, 31 years old, junior acquisitions consultant at Meridian Peak Properties, in a camel coat, chin lifted, pretending to check her phone. Aveline had known about Lizette for 11 days. She had said nothing. There had been other things to attend to. She took the envelope. She did not open it in the corridor. "You chose today," Aveline said. It was not a question. Paxton adjusted the collar of his coat. "I didn't want to drag it out." She looked toward her mother's door. Room 412, the one with the yellow post-it note, a nurse had taped to the frame, because her mother had once mentioned she liked yellow, and the nurse had remembered. "My mother is dying in that room," Aveline said. "I know," Paxton said, "and I'm sorry, but I can't keep pretending." He walked toward Lizette. They left together through the elevator. Aveline stood in the corridor alone, holding the white envelope, until the sound of the machine from room 412 pulled her back inside. What Paxton Kemp did not know, what he had never bothered to learn in 6 years of marriage, was that the company paying his salary, approving his projects, and carrying his name on every press release had been built by the woman he had just left standing in a hospital corridor. Meridian Peak Properties was a $450 million real estate development firm with offices in Toronto and Vancouver. Its public face was its executive team, polished, loud, well-connected. Its true controlling interest belonged to Caldwell Ridge Holdings, a private trust incorporated in 2001 by Aveline's parents, Leonard Bouchard and June Bouchard, who had spent 30 years turning modest residential contracts across Ontario into one of the most quietly powerful development portfolios in the country. Aveline was their only child. She had grown up on job sites, eating lunch from a cooler while her father walked through unfinished frames pointing out where a wall should breathe, where a staircase should feel like an invitation rather than a command. Her mother had been the one who read every contract twice before anyone touched a pen. June Bouchard had never trusted a handshake without a clause written somewhere behind it. When Aveline was 22, her father had slid a sealed document across the kitchen table in their house in the annex and said simply, "You don't have to understand all of it now. Just understand this. The company is yours. And one day it will need someone patient enough to protect it from people who confuse ambition with ownership." He had been 53 in that memory. He had been gone for 4 years now. The trust structure was deliberate. Caldwell Ridge Holdings held the controlling stake. Aveline's name did not appear in the public filings. Only 4 people knew the full picture: Aveline herself, Hendrik Tate, 62, the Bouchard family solicitor, who had written the original trust documents at June's kitchen table in 1998. Ruth Ann Colquhoun, 54, and the only executive June had trusted with the company's true architecture, and Casimir Osi, 40, the head of compliance and digital security, who had been hired by Leonard after a data breach in 2017, and who understood that some doors were never meant to open easily. Paxton had married Aveline 6 years ago. He had known she came from a real estate family. He had known her parents had investments. He had signed a prenuptial agreement prepared by Hendrik's firm, been advised to retain independent legal counsel to review it, declined and signed anyway without reading past the 3rd page. He had never once asked what Caldwell Ridge Holdings was. He had never needed to, because Aveline looked like someone who arranged charity galas and remembered caterers' names, and that had suited him fine while it lasted. His own name appeared on every Meridian Peak project because he was skilled at pressing the right hands at the right parties. He was skilled at convincing rooms full of people that he had built things. Aveline had let him believe that. Her mother had warned her once, sitting on an overturned crate in the first Meridian Peak site office before the glass building and the Wellington Street lobby and the Ontario limestone floors had existed, that some people loved access more than they would ever love the person who gave it to them. Aveline had listened. She had also loved Paxton once, which made the listening harder to remember. The Meridian Peak Annual Developer Showcase was 14 days away when Aveline stood in the parking structure of St. Michael's Hospital, her mother's yellow post-it note folded into her coat pocket, and called Ruthann. "I need everything that moved through Paxton's accounts in the past 8 months," she said. "All of it." Ruthann did not ask why. She had seen Lisette standing too close to Paxton at 3 separate company events and had been waiting for the moment when the question would be asked correctly. "I'll have it by morning," she said. Then Aveline called Casimir. "The Lakeshore Meridian concept deck," she said. "The architectural vision for the waterfront contract. I want the full version history. Access logs, timestamps, every hand that touched it from the beginning." Casimir was quiet for a moment. "That's been sitting on my list since February," he said carefully. "I was waiting for the right time." "The time is now," Aveline said. She spent 4 more days at her mother's bedside. June Bouchard passed on a Tuesday morning, before the sun had finished rising, with Aveline holding her hand and Hendrik waiting down the hall in the family room because he had loved June the way people love friends who outlasted everyone else they ever knew. The funeral was small. Aveline wore her mother's pearl earrings and a charcoal dress that had needed pressing. She stood at the graveside in the Beechwood section of Mount Pleasant Cemetery and did not allow herself to look at the empty space where a husband should have stood. Paxton sent flowers. The card said, "Thinking of you," in his assistant's handwriting. He did not come. Tova Ferris, 38, Aveline's closest friend since their first year at Ryerson, and the one person outside the trust circle who had watched the marriage slowly empty out. Over years, the way a house empties out when no one is tending it, stood beside her with an umbrella she refused to lower even after the sky went dry. "You don't have to do anything today," Tova said. "I'm not doing anything today," Aveline said. "Today I'm burying my mother." But the morning after, she drove to the Meridian Peak offices at 6:15 before anyone else arrived and sat in the boardroom with 3 folders Ruthann had prepared and a cup of coffee that went cold while she read. The first folder was the easiest to understand and the worst to sit with. Paxton's corporate card had paid for 11 nights at a boutique hotel on King Street West across a 4-month period. The billing category was client entertainment. There had been no clients. Casimir had pulled the lobby security footage and confirmed what the receipts couldn't quite articulate out loud. Lisette's name appeared on 3 company parking pass requests filed under project site visits for addresses that did not exist in any current Meridian Peak portfolio. Ruthann had traced a shell company, Dre & Associates, registered at a residential address in Etobicoke, back to a relative of Lisette's. $42,000 in payments across 6 months, classified as market research deliverables for which no deliverables existed. The second folder was harder. Casimir had gone into the full version history for the Lakeshore Meridian concept deck. The architectural vision that had won Meridian Peak its flagship waterfront contract in Vancouver the previous November and made Paxton a quietly celebrated figure at every Bay Street dinner since. The earliest version did not belong to Paxton. It belonged to a man named Ezra Wills. Ezra Wills, 27-year-old junior architect who had worked briefly with the firm contracted to Meridian Peak in 2022, had sent Paxton an unsolicited concept in March of that year. Subject: rough idea. Toronto waterfront mixed use. Feedback welcome. He had included 17 pages of original sketches, handwritten structural notes, and a design philosophy he called permeable towers. Buildings that did not seal themselves off from the waterfront, but opened toward it, integrating public corridors through private floor plans in a way that felt, as he had written in the margins, like the city was being invited to live inside its own skyline. Paxton had replied 3 days later. "Interesting, let me think on it." He had thought on it for 19 months, then presented it as his own at the November board meeting with new cover art and a revised title. With no attribution to Ezra Wills anywhere in the materials, except a buried reference to early-stage research consultants in an appendix no one had read. Ezra had raised the matter once, to a junior project manager who reported to Paxton. He had been told that his contribution was acknowledged in the internal research notes. He had been told that he should be grateful to have had proximity to a project of that caliber. When Ruthann had quietly reached out to him the previous week, he had driven 4 hours from Ottawa with a folder of originals, 3 USB drives, and the careful composure of someone who had spent a long time being afraid that the evidence was real, but that no one with the authority to act on it would ever be in the same room as him. Aveline had met him in a private meeting room off the main corridor. She had watched him lay the documents on the table with hands that shook slightly and then steadied when he realized that the people across from him were not there to tell him he was wrong about what had happened. "I thought about going to the press," he said, "but Paxton knows everyone. I didn't know who in this building was safe." Aveline placed her hand over the original concept pages. The handwriting on the margins was small and careful. The way young architects write when they are still learning whether their ideas are allowed to take up space. "My mother built this company so that people like Paxton couldn't do this inside its walls," Aveline said. "That was the whole point of it." Ezra looked at her. He didn't understand yet what she meant, but he understood enough to stay. The third folder was the one that finished the last thing Aveline had still been protecting inside herself. Casimir had recovered a voice memo from a deleted file on Paxton's company-issued laptop, recorded in a Meridian Peak boardroom after hours, 9 days before her mother's death. The quality was clear enough. Paxton's voice: "She won't fight anything right now. By the time she's out from under all of that grief, the showcase will be done and the Vancouver contract will be signed. There's nothing she can do about any of it from a philanthropy office." Lisette laughing softly: "She's not a problem." Paxton: "She was never a problem. She was just always in the way." Aveline listened to the recording twice, not to cause herself additional pain, to stop making excuses for the distance between the man she had married and the man she was hearing. Then she called Hendrik and told him to prepare the authorization documents. She told Casimir to embed a watermark trace on every sensitive file in the showcase package so that any unauthorized access would leave a signature that could be followed. She told Ruthann to finalize the financial disclosure package for outside counsel. She told Tova to keep the evening of November 14th free. The showcase was in 12 days. The Meridian Peak Annual Developer Showcase was held at the Grand Ballroom of a heritage building on Queen Street East that the company had itself restored 6 years ago. Ontario brick, reclaimed Douglas fir floors, original pressed tin ceilings. The kind of venue Leonard Bouchard had always said companies should use when they wanted people to understand that they still knew what permanence felt like. 500 guests filled the ballroom: investors, municipal planners, city councillors, media, university faculty from 3 architecture schools, partner firms, and the kind of people who made decisions in back rooms and preferred to be witnessed making them in front rooms first. Paxton arrived on the red carpet with Lisette beside him. He had made no effort to be discreet. The official program listed him as keynote speaker. His name was on the banners in the foyer, the signage above the east panel displays, and the digital slideshow cycling through the lobby screens beside the Lakeshore Meridian renderings. He looked like a man who had already decided the evening was a formality before a victory. Aveline arrived through the Berkeley Street entrance. She wore a fitted black dress and her mother's pearl earrings. Her father's watch, a Seiko from 1988 that June had given Leonard on their first anniversary, which kept time only approximately, as if punctuality was something it had decided not to worry about. Sat under her sleeve against her wrist, she had worn it every day since the funeral. Tova walked in beside her. Hendrik followed. Ruthann kept close with a tablet held flat in both hands. Casimir was already inside. No one at the entrance looked twice at Aveline. She was Paxton's quiet wife, the one who remembered caterers' names and stood near the windows at company events and asked people about their evenings with what appeared to be genuine interest, because it was. No one had ever considered that the ceiling above all of it was hers. Inside, the chandeliers threw warm light across the Lakeshore Meridian renderings along the east wall. Investors stood in clusters in front of Ezra's work with champagne in hand, discussing vision. Paxton stood at the center of the largest cluster, laughing at something that may or may not have been funny. He wore a navy suit Lisette had chosen for him. He had the ease of someone who had already taken possession of the future and was simply waiting for it to be handed over formally. Then he saw Aveline across the room. His laughter ended a half-second too late. He crossed the floor toward her in long, deliberate strides, lowering his voice before he reached her. "You shouldn't be here." "I'm here," Aveline said. "This isn't the place for whatever you think you're doing." He glanced at Hendrik, then at Ruthann's expression, then at Tova's, and understood something was wrong without being able to name it. "Aveline, don't make this into something." "I came to the company showcase," she said. "I have every right to be here." You're trying to embarrass me in front of. You chose today, she said, quietly. The way her mother had always said the most important things, not loudly, not with ceremony, just clearly, so there was no question about whether the words had landed. 11 days ago in that corridor at St. Michael's. You made the choice. Tonight is only the consequence. He stared at her. Something moved across his face that she could not entirely name. Not guilt, not shame, but the particular discomfort of a man who has never imagined being caught, because he has never imagined anyone quiet enough to be watching. He turned and walked back to his cluster of investors, adjusting his cufflinks. Aveline looked at Hendrik. Hendrik gave a small nod. She sent one word to Casimir. Begin. The lights dimmed at 8:45. The program called for a 5-minute tribute reel of Paxton's development highlights, a production that had cost the company $14,000 and featured aerial footage of every project he had attached his name to in 6 years, set to music that sounded like ambition. The ballroom went quiet, chairs angled toward the screen. Paxton moved toward the front podium where the keynote microphone waited. The Meridian Peak corporate logo appeared on screen. Beneath it was not the tribute reel. It was the company's official legal disclosure seal. Before tonight's presentation, Meridian Peak Properties is required to address verified misconduct connected to the Lakeshore Meridian project and the conduct of certain company personnel. Paxton stopped walking. The first document appeared. Hotel receipts billed to the project account. The guest name clearly visible, the billing category reading Client Entertainment beside it. Then the Dre & Associates invoices. Then the shell company registration traced back to a relative of Lizette's. Then Ruthan's full financial summary, stamped with the company's accounting seal and countersigned by outside counsel. The whispers that moved through the ballroom were not quiet ones. Lizette sat in the second row. Her posture changed in the way that people's posture changes when they understand that the room they are in has become a different room entirely. Then the screen shifted to the architectural records. Ezra's original concept email appeared in full. Timestamped March 2022, subject line intact, his 17 pages of sketches, his handwritten philosophy in the margins. Beside it, Paxton's November presentation with the same structural bones under different cover art, Ezra's name absent from every page. Then the email trail. Paxton telling Ezra his contribution was noted in the internal research files. Paxton's message to the junior manager, the kid should be grateful for the experience. Someone near the back of the room said something under their breath that carried. Paxton's voice came from near the podium, high and tight. This is not whoever authorized this. This is not a legal presentation. This is... A slide answered him. This presentation has been authorized by Meridian Peak Properties Legal Committee, Ethics Committee, and Controlling Ownership Authority. All records shown are preserved under legal hold and reviewed by independent outside counsel. Then the voice memo played. By the time she's out from under all of that grief, the showcase will be done. There's nothing she can do about any of it from a philanthropy office. The ballroom stopped breathing. A woman in the third row pressed both hands over her mouth. A municipal planning representative stood halfway and then sat back down. One of the architecture school faculty members looked at the wall of Ezra's renderings and then looked at the screen and then looked at the wall again. Paxton looked at himself on the screen as though he were watching a recording of someone he had not yet realized was him. The screen went dark for 3 seconds. Then it displayed a single document, the Caldwell Ridge Holdings Trust Structure, its controlling stake in Meridian Peak Properties clearly notated, the active chair designation at the bottom in the same clean font the company used for everything that mattered. Aveline Bouchard-Kemp, controlling chair. The room turned. Aveline stepped away from the side wall and walked down the center of the ballroom. The crowd parted without being asked to. She was not wearing a name badge. She walked past the Lakeshore Meridian panels, past the investors who had spent the evening discussing her husband's vision in front of another man's work, past the podium where Paxton still stood, and she stopped beside Ezra Wills, who had been seated near the back, between Tova and a company legal associate, and who had the expression of someone who had stopped believing that rooms like this were ever going to be meant for him. She stood beside him, not in front of him, beside him. The rooms understood. Meridian Peak Properties was built to develop properties that serve communities, not the reputations of the people managing them. Her voice was steady. It did not need to be loud. Tonight, the company formally recognizes Ezra Wills as the originating designer whose work forms the foundation of the Lakeshore Meridian project. His name will appear in all future project materials. his compensation and credit will be corrected before any further public release of this project. The Lakeshore Meridian will not proceed under the current executive structure. Ezra looked down. When he looked up, his eyes were bright in the way that takes a moment to blink away. Aveline turned toward the podium. "You're suspended from all Meridian Peak operations effective immediately," she said. "Hendrik will provide the formal notice. Your system access has already been terminated." Paxton's mouth opened. Aveline, the way he said her name, the same way he had said it 100 ordinary Tuesday mornings over coffee, over nothing, made something in her chest close quietly and finally. "You hid this from me. You never told me. You never asked who I was," she said. "You decided what I was worth and stopped there." She turned away before he could say anything else. Hendrik was already crossing the floor with the sealed envelope. From somewhere in the back of the room, the applause began the way it always does when something true is finally spoken in a room full of people who had been afraid to say it themselves. One person, then three, then a row, then the whole ballroom rising. Not for the tribute reel, not for the Lakeshore Meridian, not for any name printed on any banner above any door. Paxton left through the side exit. Lizette did not follow him. Ezra stood where Aveline had placed him in front of his own work, while strangers introduced themselves to him for the first time. The weeks that followed moved the way real consequences do, not in one clean wave but in a tide that comes in piece by piece until the ground is covered. Outside counsel confirmed the financial misconduct findings. Paxton's executive access was terminated, his compensation reviewed for clawback, and the matter referred to the appropriate professional and civil bodies. The Dre and Associates payments were recovered. The Lakeshore Meridian project was paused, pending a full credit and rights review overseen by a solicitor Ezra's firm retained through Caldwell Ridge Holdings. Casimir filed a compliance report so thorough it was later used as a reference document internally. Ruthann rebuilt the project budget with Ezra's name on the cover page, which was where it had always belonged. Aveline did not read the news coverage. She read the restructuring documents instead. The morning after the showcase, she walked into Meridian Peak Properties through the front entrance on Wellington's Street. The lobby had Ontario limestone floors. Her father had chosen because he had said a company that develops land should be built on something that actually belongs to this place. The light through the front windows at 8 in the morning was the color of early November in Toronto, which is gray and bright and cold in a way that feels less like winter arriving and more like the city being honest with you. The receptionist at the front desk looked up and paused in the particular way people pause when they are recalibrating what they know about someone. "Good morning," Aveline said. "Good morning," the receptionist said, and then carefully, "Mrs. Bouchard-Kemp." She rode the elevator alone to the chair's office on the 6th floor. She had not been in it since her father's last day well enough to sit at a desk. It still smelled faintly of the cedar tea her mother had always brought to long meetings in a plain thermos. Never the branded company one, because June had thought the logo looked too serious for something you drank out of. Aveline sat at the desk. Through the window, the city was there the way it always was, indifferent, enormous, fully itself. She opened her father's last letter, which Hendrik had carried in his briefcase for 4 years, waiting. He had given it to her quietly in the car after the showcase, without ceremony, the way her father would have wanted. The first line read, "If they mistake your patience for permission, correct them once clearly, and then let the work speak." She read it twice. Then she set the letter flat on the desk, opened the first file Ruthann had prepared for the restructuring, and began. Her mother's earrings were still in her ears. Her father's watch was still on her wrist, keeping time the way it always had. Approximately as though precision were something it had quietly decided was beside the point. She did not change it. Some things were worth keeping exactly as they were.